Well, it's not very often I get a chance to do an FTD review, but I'm going to do one today because I've got my copy of The Last Tours Volume 3, and I got it fairly quickly, fairly early, and I've played it, and so I thought I'd let you know a little bit about it. Obviously, it's the third in the series. Hopefully there will be some more. There are still some more tours to go from 77. They've changed the color scheme on the back and the spine and on the front to pink and grey instead of blue and grey, which they did for volume 1 and 2. So I'm hoping that means there's going to be at least one more using this pink and grey colour scheme. So these are 6 concerts from April 1977. None of them are complete because they were no longer recording the first few songs. Most of the concerts begin with Love Me, which was generally about the 4th song. And they were not recording the band introductions, which for me is a little bit of a disappointment, as I'll explain a little bit later on. And if you can read that, those are the track listings. I'll just show you one of the discs. They're all the same. Not surprisingly, it uses the RCA Victor orange label design. So, as you can see on the front there's an audio disclaimer sticker, and they put that on the front of all live FTD releases. They have been doing for the past few years now, and I think it's just to cover themselves, really. It says there are various audio imperfections due to limitations of the original source, and these are all mono soundboard recordings. So generally with FTD soundboards, you're on safe ground, I think. There have been instances of a few CDs that clearly play a little bit too fast or a little bit too slow. I say clearly, not everybody can hear. And there are also instances of recordings. I think, for instance, the Spring 75 tour, one of the tours in 1975, the orchestra was very, very quiet, and the voices and the piano were especially loud. But in general, they're pretty good. They're listenable, and this one is no exception. As far as the audio imperfections, as I say, I think that's there to cover themselves, really. There are a couple of things worth pointing out, very, very minor. In the second show, I think it is, Ann Arbor, Michigan, there are a few dropouts, very, very slight split-second dropouts that don't really spoil, didn't really spoil my enjoyment of the CD anyway. And in the first show here, Toledo, Ohio, during Polk Saladani, the bass is extremely loud in parts. It's almost like the Jerry Sheff show at times. There are other sound issues which had nothing to do with FTD. There were problems on the night. So, for example, on at least 2 or 3 occasions, there are problems with feedback. And at one point, Elvis actually stops "You Gave Me a Mountain" because he says he can't hear the backing singers. I seem to recall that one feedback being a problem on that song on other occasions too. I wonder why. I'm not sure why. A lot of the songs are repeated across all shows. Well, there's a few songs which appear on every show, and there are several songs which appear on 4 or 5 shows. But that's nothing unusual for an Elvis tour, an Elvis concert series. All right, so let's talk about some of the more interesting moments on the various CDs. The first thing that I want to talk about is a fan calling out for Blue Hawaii, and Elvis attempts to start Blue Hawaii. He goes into the song, urging the band to join in, but unfortunately they don't know it, so he has to stop it after one line, unfortunately. Another unfortunate thing for me, as I said earlier, is the lack of band introductions. I do like the solo section for various reasons, and in this set there's only the introductions are only on the first CD, and even then it's a very, very shortened version. It's not a full version, probably to the delight of many fans, I guess, but I do like the introduction section, and I think it's a real shame that it's missing from these performances, because at some of the shows James Burton was actually playing something different in his solo section. So the last concert, St. Paul, I know he did something called Delta Lady, a song called Delta Lady, which was actually, I think, recorded by Joe Cocker. And it's a really good version. I've heard an audience recording of it. And so he was playing that. He did it a few times during this particular tour. So it's a shame we haven't got an official version of that as of this moment. Another audience request comes during the Milwaukee show when a fan calls out for Old Shep. And Elvis says, "Old Shep, I was 2 years old when I recorded that." But how cool would that have been if Elvis had actually said, "Yeah, all right," then and jumped on the piano and done a couple of verses of Old Shep. That would have been a real highlight of the disc, I think. So I talked about Blue Hawaii and how Elvis couldn't get started with Blue Hawaii. There are a couple of instances where he does get started, but then they don't get very far with the songs. The first one is Fairy Tale, which is on the Kalamazoo disc 2. And Elvis says he wants to do that instead of If You Love Me. And then he gets through the first 30 seconds or so and then stops. He decides he doesn't want to play it. And then they go back to If You Love Me, Let Me Know. Then on the last show, St. Paul, he's asking about the day. He says, "Is it Saturday?" This is quite early on in the show. And then he remembers Rip It Up. And he starts singing, "It's Saturday night and I just got paid." And with it being a fairly standard rock and roll song, the band are able to join in. But they only get about one verse in, and then they just stop it. Another thing I always quite enjoy about Elvis concerts is the little things that he says. There's always a chance of something interesting coming out of his mouth. And during the which show was it? The Jewelers show on April 29th. After It's Now or Never, he actually admits to the crowd that on occasion the backing vocalist will support him on a high note or a low note if he can't reach it. And I think at the end of that version he said, "Thank you, Larry." And I'm guessing that means Larry Strickland, the bass singer in the Stamps. Now, you may not know this, but he was actually married to Naomi Judd of the Judds, of course. Now, I don't know anything about their music, but I do remember they were really big. Another song that you can hear on this set of CDs, which they weren't performing very much at that time, is Big Boss Man, which is in the Kalamazoo show. And I think that's one that Elvis just decided to do on the spur of the moment. It sounds that way from listening to the CD. And it's a really good version. It's really well sung and well played by the band. They seem to enjoy doing it, perhaps, as I say, because it was the first time they'd done it in a while. And you get another version of the song as well from one of the later performances. So overall, we don't really learn anything about Elvis as a performer from these performances, but it's good to hear them, and it's great to have them on CD at last, official CDs I'm talking about. And he actually performs better than I thought. In fact, this whole last tour series has been better than I expected. I think I just had this image of 1977 concerts just being poor all the way through the year, but I don't think that's the case. The weakest show is probably the first one, which is I think that says Toledo, and the version of "And I Love You So" on that show is not particularly strong, but the other shows are generally not bad, pretty good. And he certainly seems to be having a lot of fun. There are quite a few occasions where Elvis just starts cracking up laughing, and it's almost like Are You Lonesome Tonight, the laughing version, part 2. But yeah, definitely worth having, I think. It's not going to be a set of CDs that I, or probably you too, will return to very often. But as I say, it's great to hear, and something's just dropped on the floor, and good to have. Yeah, so if you want to know any more about that, just drop me a comment in the comment section below. But thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Cheers.